Trump says the US and Canada have natural conflict on trade, but those words reveal far more than he intended. As Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney sits across from him in the Oval Office, Trump's bravado can't hide a simple truth. His trade war is crumbling, and he needs Canada more than he's willing to admit.
And so you see the two leaders there chatting. We would expect them to say a few words, maybe take some questions. There are Canadian reporters in the room as well as American reporters.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's an honor to have the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, who I have made very popular. He's an extremely popular Prime Minister, and I'm very honored to do it because I liked him. Right from the beginning, I've liked him, and we've had a good relationship. We have some natural conflict, but we'll probably work that out. But we've had a very strong relationship, and your hosting of the various countries that showed up, that was a beautiful job you did, and I appreciate it very much. We're going to be talking about trade. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. We'll certainly be talking about Gaza. We're in very serious negotiations to, I guess you could say, depending on the way you count, 3,000 years. You could say 500 years. You could say, but that it's been raging for a long time. And I think there's a possibility that we could have peace in the Middle East. It's something even beyond the Gaza situation. We want a release of the hostages immediately, etc. And so our team is over there now. Another team just left, and other countries, literally every country in the world has supported the plan.
Yep.
I don't think there's anybody that hasn't, actually, not that I've seen. But there's a real chance that we could do something, so you may have some questions on that later. But in the meantime, we'll spend some time and we'll make some deals and we'll do some things that are good for both of our countries. And Mark, it's an honor to have you.
The October 7th meeting between Trump and Carney wasn't just another diplomatic photo op. It was a moment that exposed the fundamental weakness in Trump's aggressive tariff strategy. While Trump spoke of mutual love and claimed Canada would walk away very happy, the reality tells a different story, one where Trump's own policies are eating away at American prosperity. To understand why this meeting matters so much, we need to rewind to February 2025, when Trump made good on his campaign promise to slap punishing tariffs on America's closest allies.
To win, to have a deal by July the 21st. The Prime Minister's not flying all the way to Washington, D.C. just to have lunch. By the sounds of it, that's all they are going to accomplish, Mr. Speaker. We've seen since he promised this win, American tariffs on Canada have doubled. The Prime Minister has caved on counter tariffs, on the digital services tax, and on everything else, and 86,000 Canadians have lost their jobs as a result of his weakness. Surely the Prime Minister will finally keep his promise and come home with a win. What will it be?
In a move that shocked the international community, Trump imposed a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods, citing border security and fentanyl concerns. By August, frustrated with the lack of progress in negotiations, he cranked those tariffs up to 35%. But here's what Trump didn't anticipate. Canada wasn't going to roll over. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who took office in March 2025, quickly proved he wasn't cut from the same cloth as his predecessor. While Justin Trudeau had often appeared to placate Trump's demands, Carney took a different approach, one that would ultimately expose the flaws in Trump's trade strategy. Carney's response was swift and strategic. Canada imposed retaliatory tariffs on American goods, targeting everything from oranges to motorcycles, alcohol to cosmetics. But more importantly, Carney began implementing what he called an economic strategy to move Canada from reliance to resilience. This wasn't just political posturing, it was a fundamental restructuring of Canada's economic relationship with the United States. The Canadian Prime Minister announced billions in funding for domestic industries, launched a comprehensive Buy Canadian policy, and began aggressively diversifying trade relationships. In September 2025, Carney rolled out measures specifically designed to help Canadian businesses weather what he called the rupture in the trade environment. The message was clear: Canada was preparing for a world where it couldn't rely on unrestricted access to American markets. Meanwhile, Trump's tariffs were having the opposite effect of what he intended. Instead of bringing Canada to heel, they were devastating American industries that depended on Canadian raw materials. Steel and aluminum producers in the United States found themselves paying 50% more for Canadian inputs.
Well, if it's true, it certainly represents a breakthrough. You have to remember in context that we have the lowest tariff rates in the world at about 5%. That's because most of the products which cross the border are CUSMA compliant. The problem is that there are some exceptions which the United States have carved out that are at 50%, and that includes steel and aluminum. And for those particular industries, they're being really hard done by. But we have reason to believe that the United States is suffering as well from the steel and aluminum tariffs. In the case of aluminum, probably close to 75% of the aluminum used in the United States comes from Canada, which is really accelerating the cost for a lot of commodities within the United States and putting pressure on the government to find a compromise. So it wouldn't be surprised if there was some movement on those two commodities.
The lumber industry was bracing for another blow as Trump threatened new 10% tariffs on Canadian softwood, a move that would directly increase housing costs for American families. The economic data tells the story Trump doesn't want to acknowledge. Canada's unemployment rate, while elevated at 7.1%, reflects a country in transition, moving away from dependence on the American market. But in the United States, the picture is more complex. American farmers are clamoring for bailouts, according to industry reports.
No, we're suggesting he actually keep his promise and negotiate a win. The Liberals' excuses are tripping over each other. Last week, the Prime Minister said the American tariffs on Canada are so bad that that's why we have the fastest shrinking economy in the G7, the second highest unemployment, $52 billion of net investment that has fled, 86,000 jobs that have been lost. And now they're saying that we have the best possible position. Which is it? Why is our economy so bad? Because of failed Liberal diplomacy on trade or bad economic management at home?
Bourbon producers are pushing for tariff relief. Automakers are asking for breaks from the very policies Trump claimed would help them. As one expert noted, the U.S. economy is softening under the weight of the administration's tariffs. The Trump administration has been forced to consider significant bailouts for industries hurt by retaliatory measures, exactly the kind of government intervention Trump once criticized. This is the context that makes Trump's words in the Oval Office so revealing. When he spoke of natural conflict between the two countries, he was inadvertently admitting that his zero-sum approach to trade was fundamentally flawed.
Questions on that later. But in the meantime, we'll spend some time and we'll make some deals and we'll do some things that are good for both of our countries. And Mark, it's an honor to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. If I may, you kindly hosted me and some of my colleagues a few months ago, and I said at the time, you are a transformative president. And since then, the transformation in the economy, unprecedented commitments of NATO partners to defense spending, peace from India, Pakistan through to Azerbaijan, Armenia, disabling Iran as a force of terror, and now, and I'm running out of time, but this is in many respects the most important.
The merger of Canada and the United States.
That wasn't where I was going. On this solemn day of commemoration of the horrific attacks of October 7th, for the first time in decades, hundreds of years, thousands of years, this prospect of peace that you've made possible. Canada stands foursquare behind those efforts, and we'll do whatever we can to support
Very
that.
nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark, very much. Any questions?
What would it take for you to drop or lower your tariffs on Canadian sectors, including aluminum and steel?
Well, we're going to be talking about that with the Prime Minister. We'll be talking about tariffs. We'll be talking about a lot of that, but that's for a little bit later on. I want to just acknowledge our great ambassador. Is he doing a good job?
He's doing a good job.
Otherwise, I'll get him out of there so fast. No, you have a
Countries that share the world's longest undefended border, that exchange $2.5 billion worth of goods and services daily, that have integrated supply chains built over decades, these aren't natural enemies. They're natural partners. But Trump's rhetoric has consistently treated trade as warfare, viewing every Canadian export as an American loss. This worldview has led him to impose tariffs on a country that supplies 60% of American crude oil imports and 85% of electricity imports. It's led him to tax Canadian steel and aluminum at rates that make American manufacturers less competitive globally. Carney, by contrast, has approached the situation with the calculated precision of someone who understands both economics and politics. His decision to drop retaliatory tariffs in August wasn't a sign of weakness, it was strategic positioning. As one Canadian official explained, it was meant to be viewed as an act of goodwill to get talks progressing. The Canadian Prime Minister has also shown he understands Trump's psychology. In the October meeting, he dubbed Trump a transformative president, the kind of flattery that Trump craves. But unlike other leaders who have tried to manage Trump through praise alone, Carney has backed up his diplomatic words with concrete economic policies that reduce Canada's dependence on American goodwill. The numbers reveal the true impact of Trump's approach. While trade accounts for 67% of Canada's GDP compared to just 24% for the United States, Canada has been systematically working to reduce its reliance on the American market. The Buy Canadian policy announced in September directly challenges American suppliers who have historically benefited from Canadian government contracts. More significantly, Canada has been building relationships with other trading partners. Carney has indicated willingness to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping at appropriate time to discuss trade, a move that would have been unthinkable under the previous Canadian government. Trump's meeting with Carney was supposed to demonstrate American strength and Canadian desperation. Instead, it revealed the opposite. When Trump said he wants Canada to do well, particularly in reference to the auto manufacturing sector, he was acknowledging the integrated nature of North American production. When he praised Canada's efforts on fentanyl trafficking, saying they've done a much better job than in the past, he was undermining his own justification for the tariffs. The most telling moment came when Trump suggested that negotiations with Canada were more complicated than maybe any other agreement the U.S. has with other nations. This wasn't an admission of complexity, it was an admission of failure. Trump's transactional approach to international relations works when dealing with countries that have little leverage. It falls apart when dealing with integrated economies where both sides have something to lose. Canadian sources heading into the meeting had modest expectations, perhaps some relief on steel tariffs that could create a framework for addressing other sectors. But even these limited goals highlight how dramatically the relationship has deteriorated under Trump's leadership. The fact that Canada is hoping for partial relief from punitive tariffs on one of its most important exports shows how far Trump has pushed America's most reliable ally. The broader implications extend beyond trade statistics. Canada has historically been America's most steadfast partner on defense and security issues. The two countries share intelligence, coordinate on border security, and collaborate on Arctic defense. But Trump's aggressive trade policies are forcing Canada to reconsider these relationships. When Trump jokingly suggested making Canada the 51st state, a comment he's repeated multiple times, he revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of the relationship.
To which I said, well, why don't you just join our country? You become 51, become the 51st state, and you get it for free.
Canada's point person on U.S. trade says he's optimistic some sort of agreement can still be reached as industry deals with biting tariffs on the steel, aluminum, auto, and lumber sectors.
Canada isn't a supplicant seeking American protection. It's a sovereign nation with its own interests, reasoned in multiple ways. Mexico, also a USMCA partner, was notably spared from the August tariff increases that hit Canada. This differential treatment has pushed Canada to consider whether its interests might be better served through bilateral relationships rather than trilateral ones. Carney's strategic patience contrasts sharply with Trump's impulsive decision-making. While Trump tweets threats and imposes tariffs based on daily mood swings, Carney has a strategy that prioritizes Canadian economic independence. Carney's willingness to impose retaliatory tariffs and his emphasis on reducing dependence on American markets represents a fundamental change in how Canada views the relationship. Trump's claim that Canada would walk away very happy from their meeting rings hollow when examined against the actual outcomes. Canadian sources describe their expectations as modest, hoping for partial relief on steel tariffs that might create a framework for future negotiations. This isn't the language of a country expecting major concessions. It's the language of a country managing a difficult relationship with an unpredictable partner. The timing of the meeting also reveals Trump's weakening position. With American farmers demanding bailouts, manufacturers struggling with higher input costs, and polling showing increasing public concern about the economy, Trump needs a trade victory more than Carney does. The Canadian Prime Minister can afford to be patient. His domestic political position doesn't depend on immediately resolving the trade dispute. Trump's tariff strategy was supposed to demonstrate American strength and force trading partners into submission. Instead, it has revealed the limits of economic coercion when dealing with sophisticated economies that can adapt and retaliate. Canada's response has been particularly effective because it combines immediate tactical moves, like the retaliatory tariffs, with longer-term strategic shifts toward economic independence. The meeting between Trump and Carney represents more than a negotiation over trade policy. It's a test case for whether Trump's transactional approach to international relations can succeed with America's closest allies. The evidence suggests it cannot. Countries with deep economic integration, shared security interests, and democratic governance structures require different diplomatic approaches than emerging markets or authoritarian regimes. As both leaders continue their discussions, the fundamental question remains: will Trump recognize that his aggressive approach has weakened rather than strengthened America's position? Or will he continue to treat trade as a zero-sum game, driving allies toward economic independence and alternative partnerships? Carney's patient, strategic approach suggests he's prepared for either outcome. His government has built the policy infrastructure to weather continued American hostility while remaining open to genuine partnership if Trump changes course. This flexibility gives Canada significant advantages in any extended trade dispute. The October 7th meeting may have been cordial, but it exposed the fundamental weakness in Trump's trade strategy. When the President of the United States has to praise a foreign leader's negotiating skills while imposing punitive tariffs on that same country, it reveals a policy approach that has lost coherence. Trump's trade war with Canada isn't just failing, it's actively undermining American interests and strengthening Canadian resolve to chart an independent course. The real question isn't whether Canada will walk away very happy from these negotiations. It's whether America will recognize that its aggressive approach to its most reliable ally has been a strategic disaster that needs to be reversed before the damage becomes irreparable.